morning, everyone. Sarah here at Three Little Potters, and this video is a review of Rue Stoneware by Kentucky Mudworks. I'm going to start out with a little bit of video of me throwing with it, my thoughts on how it is to work with, and then I'm going to show you some results from glaze firing and possible combinations of glazes to use with this clay. So first impressions so far, it came too wet. The bag of clay was, and I love a good soft clay, don't get me wrong, but this was so wet. I cut off a little piece. I tried to throw with it. It was just like slop. I left the bag open. I pulled the clay all the way out, let it sit on my wedging board for a day, and it is still really, really wet. Obviously, I could wedge this clay, lay it all out flat, let it dry, and then wedge it back up, and it would be fine to work with. But if this is a problem, since I'm not normally wedge clay, if this is a problem that is consistent with every bag, then that's going to rule out me being able to use this clay, unless I love the results enough to basically purchase it and let it sit in my house for 6 months till it gets to a reasonable consistency. So yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to throw with it this wet. You know, in some ways you think, oh, wet clay, it's going to be easier to center, but what it becomes is so easy to knock it off. Just the slightest movement when it's that wet just kind of puts you back at the beginning. So I'll see how this goes, and hopefully these 50 or so balls of clay will be fine to work with, because I would really like to be able to see the results of this clay to see if it's something that I want to place a larger order for. I have been wanting a buff clay for a long time, and the Laguna buff clay that I tried, despite the reassurances of the pottery store, for some reason it did not vitrify at cone 6. So I'm definitely looking for something that will vitrify at cone 6. I don't want leaky pots of all the things, right? Can you see how easily I just knocked that off center a little bit? So this bag of clay I ordered with their flat rate shipping. So Kentucky Mudworks has a thing where basically you can buy just 25 pounds of clay. It's so wet, it's really hard to get off. Anyway, you can buy the 25 pounds of clay and they sort of build the shipping in. So I think, you know, this bag of clay cost me $30 or so, $33 for the 25-pound bag. So normally at the pottery store it would be a lot cheaper than that, but it's nice that the shipping was built in. So yeah, I'm not sure why the roux is so squashy. If anybody else uses this clay, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it. Is it always this wet? Because I definitely would like a nice buff stoneware clay, but it is I don't want to have to be working with a temperamental clay that's the wrong consistency either. So okay, so you can see how much I was struggling to throw with this clay. It really just was too wet to work with. Since filming that video, I did go to the clay store and I got another bag of the Rue Stoneware, and I would say it is just as soft. It's just very, very muck. So as far as ease of throwing, it's a 1 out of 10. Definitely, you know, I had more footage in that clip of me throwing, and it just sort of is a 18 to 20 minutes of me just complaining more and more about my difficulty throwing, about it being too wet. You know, obviously I should have taken the time to just spread it all out on a wedging board and sort of reworked the clay. I just don't have time for that. I had already ordered more bags of clay before I got my test out of the kiln with that clay. So now I am stuck with another 50 pounds of it to use. So I may, in fact, just let this sit for a while till it becomes a better workable consistency. So when the results came out of the kiln, I actually liked this clay, the result of this clay, more than I wanted to. Yeah, well, here, let's look at a few of these from the kiln just really quick. And this is one of the best ones. There's a sort of fuming or color gradation that happens with this clay. I'm going to show you here. So these were in different kiln shelves, and you can see here that this one on the bottom shelf, hottest shelf, was a lot darker than this. And I think you can also see the placement of where it was compared to the elements. So this side, I believe, was closest to the elements. And, you know, there was a definite amount of possible chrome fuming in this kiln, but I think that I'm looking at this color based on heat more so than the fuming. But I'm going to run subsequent tests to check on that. But yeah, definitely a bigger difference there. Here is the Rue Stoneware bisque fired to cone 04, which is what I did. You know, I think my intention was to not sponge these rims at all, but to a certain extent, I believe I did, just because it was so hard to work with. I think that the majority of these finished products, to me, have rims that are rougher than what I would like. And looking at this one, I would say that some of that roughness is apparent in the bisque. So it's more having to do with my trouble throwing with it. When you're pulling up with a clay that's that soft, it's very, very hard not to make a rim too thin. And very hard to push back down on it to sort of make it a little bit flatter so that the glaze can pool a little bit more on that very top and make it smoother. So for these, if I had pushed back down on it, I just would have lost the whole pot. So you can see these are very basic forms because I felt like I didn't have a lot of ability to move it in and out and work with it. I do think, though, that the buff result of the clay is very successful. It was just so hard to work with. You know, I know when I was pulling this out of the kiln, I think, you know, based on some of the responses, people were like, "Oh, the roux," and you know, in my head, I'm like, "Oh, really? It looks good." You know, sort of a little bit of dread because the result looks good, but getting there was not fun. Um, it's definitely, I don't think, a clay that I would buy much of. Maybe I could tolerate 25 pounds a year, but yeah, it's certainly not going to become a staple clay. The clay was also so wet coming off the wheel that I would have had to work with bats and leave it sitting on the bat for a long time to kind of be workable before I could pull it off. So, you know, a lot of finger dents. I don't necessarily mind that. Even trimming, though, I was able to get rid of a lot of these finger spots where I'm trying to get it off of the wheel, and it's just because it's so smooth, it's not letting go. But yes. So all of these have rough rims, and they are all very pretty. You know, another reason why you can get rough rims is glaze breaking over the rim. So basically, the things that you love about a glaze, making it sort of runny and really beautiful when it hits texture. You know how you'll get that light spot in the texture, and in the grooves, it'll be a more solid color. Well, that's exactly the thing that with a stoneware can hurt your smoothness of your rim, right? Because it's breaking over all those little teeny bumps in the stoneware on the rim, and that's really where you don't want it, on that edge. You know, and admittedly, my throwing of these edges could have been much better, but it would have required a lot more prep for the clay to make those edges better. Let's look at some of the combos. Here we have emerald green, over Studio White on the roux. And these are both very static glazes. They don't do a lot of movement unless you have a really fluxy glaze on top. And even with that, I still have a few spots on this rim that I'm not in love with. But it's pretty, okay? So this is my variegated Dove Gray over Midnight. Sorry, with just Midnight. Midnight right here on this rim. Let's look at these a little more close up. This is Rising Sun Chang. It has a little bit of Lynette Opal. If I do continue to work with this clay, I'm going to make sure to start my flux glaze here rather than at the exact rim, with hope that it will allow some of this glaze to cover up the roughness of the clay more. This is Storm Mixed Glaze with Jen's Juicy Fruit on the rim, and Jen's Juicy Fruit did not behave well with any of these speckled clays that I tried. And you can see the pinholes here. I hope you can also see the nice sort of metallic glint to it. So it is very pretty and has some refire potential. But again, here you can see that little flaw right on the rim. So that's something that I'll be sanding down and refiring. This rim was rounded enough. And that edge is the inner edge is a little bit rough. So this would be Sunrise over Studio White. Sunrise is that spectrum glaze. It's definitely, the clay body itself has that very rough texture. It's very much like beach sand, so if you're looking for a combination that has that beach sand feel, this is a good starting point. Similarly here, this is Chun Seafoam over Studio White, a full coat of Studio White, and then completely covered it with the Chun Seafoam. I'm less bothered with a rough rim on ring dishes, but this does have that texture showing through. And this one also has some flaws. This is Studio White with my floating blue and Dirty Snow working as a modifier. So some nice drips there. Pretty large flaw here. It's not too bad, that rim. So for this piece, it was first dipped in Studio White, and then it has Strontium Gloss, and then variegated Dove Gray just here. Same rim problems. I do think that the Studio White glaze looks nice over the speckles here. It kind of gives something. Needs to be a little bit sanded, but June Purple and Lynette Opal and Chun Seafoam over this. Spots, roughness, another spot here, although that looks like organic matter that burnt out. And here we have Honey Flux and Firebrick Red over the roux. So as you can see, I think some really pretty glaze combinations with this clay. It did behave fairly well with all of my different glazes. It's just more of a, do you want to put up with how temperamental the clay is to throw with? Maybe, right? That's pretty nice. I would like to see how capitalizing on that color change could be. If I could possibly, put them along the edges of a kiln shelf so that they're closer to the elements on one side and possibly have that sort of variation in color in the clay. So other options for, smoothing these out after is, burnishing the clay when it's leather hard, or, making sure to use a chamois when you're finishing up that rim, or even sanding it when it's in its bisque form. I don't generally sand bisque because of the health issues, and I don't want to have to wear a mask all the time when I'm working. But those are all options if this clay is something that the result is enough for you to work through it. From the Kentucky Mudworks website on this clay, they describe it as roux is a peachy, lightly speckled, very smooth, mid-fire stoneware clay. They say it throws excellently. Debatable. And I'm also going to debate the very smooth. It's no B mix for sure. You can feel the texture of that clay when you're working with it. Not a deal breaker. My hands aren't bleeding or anything, but it definitely has more texture than the Speckled Dark Star, Brown Bear, and B mix for sure. It is definitely a rougher clay. Bisque's rougher feels rougher in the final product as well. It is a light peachy pretty color though, so we'll give them that. Your other numbers for this clay, it is at cone 6, it has a shrinkage of 11% and the absorption is less than 1%. So stats are good, shrinkage is good, everything's good as far as that. I did not see a lot of crazing with this clay. These have been sitting for a little while. I did notice, if you look very closely on this one, there may be just a hint on the outside, and that would be likely from the Dirty Snow modifier I used, which is very fluid and has a high melt. So thanks for watching, everybody. Like and subscribe if you found this content helpful. I'll be doing a few more clay reviews this week, and then we'll be doing a lot more glaze reviews as well. Thanks for watching.